Hi everyone. So myself Shailesh Chaskar. I will just quickly introduce myself. I have been working in IT industry for almost 18 years, and I have a combined experience of software development and as well as being into the role of production management, SRE, and DevOps. And recently, in last 2 to 3 years, I have been working on different cloud projects. Feel free to browse my profile on LinkedIn, where you can see the details around the contributions I made as part of Google Cloud community also, and as I'm certified in Google, I'm also working hands-on on Azure, and that's where I'm thankful to Azure Pune Tech community, via which I could share the knowledge that I've gathered, with practical hands-on. Recently, I've joined some organization. Earlier, I was part of a startup. I'll add those details in LinkedIn as well, so that if needed, you can reach out to me over here. Okay, and today I plan to cover a topic called as Azure Virtual Private Network. This is my second meetup session that I'm taking virtually. In the first meetup session, it was more around identity access management and privilege identity management, the way identity management works on Azure platform. So if you want, feel free to browse the YouTube channel from Pune Tech community. There you will find that video recording. It was somewhere back in November. Continuing with Azure Virtual Private Network, today's session objectives and the agenda are as followed. We'll go at a very high level, understanding what is the private network that we are trying to set up. How does VPN work? Azure, how does Azure provide a service when it comes to securing your network with VPN? Different gateway types that are available that we should be aware of. Then, what are the VPN gateway types Azure provides us with? Then a bit of comparison, because there's a lot of confusion when we talk about virtual private network with VNet peering and virtual private network gateways. We'll go through them and a detailed demo. This is what I did in my first session as well. I want to spend good amount of time on the demo, how we configure and how we would evaluate certain use cases. A very small quiz to make it more interesting, followed with any Q&A if anyone has on the call. Okay. Before we start, I had last time interacted with the audiences where we did the demo in an interactive fashion. Some of the features were tested by the people on call. I got one volunteer name. Do you guys mind anyone sharing another volunteer whom I can give access to my Azure platform? I have a production version licensed platform access, so I can add them to my Active Directory, and then they also can do some kind of testing that we are going to do as part of the demo down the line. So feel free to share your ID on the chat. I'll get you added into the Active Directory so that you can also interactively execute the demo steps. Okay, let's get started. I'll just keep it simple, not going too much into detail, right? What is virtual private network? We all know virtual private network is nothing but it describes an opportunity to establish a protected network connection when we're using public network. So let us, in a very simple term, understand that VPN is nothing but something that protects us from hackers, snoopers, or anyone who is trying to encrypt, who is trying to look into our data, right? So we are trying to hide it from the people when we are on public internet. VPN ensures that there is a VPN client, there's a VPN server in the background, there's a topology via which this whole interaction or sharing of the data between the two endpoints is protected. Whenever we connect via VPN, one thing you can observe is your source, mainly the IP and the location also, is somewhere else, so that no one can really track it. So that's one main reason why we should try to use VPN as much as possible when it comes to your home network as well. And obviously, when we are on cloud working for our organization with a production live application, it always makes sense to connect via VPN. Same thing applies when we are on on premises as well. So having a VPN always makes it more secure, and that is one of the aspects which can also make you compliant. So knowing a VPN setting up in your organization and diligently following and having good governance around it is very essential. So let us go through this short description. VPN describes the opportunity to establish a protected network connection when using public network. So simple, as we discussed. If you're using public network, always use VPN as far as possible. VPN encrypts your internet traffic and disguise your online identity. So the most important aspect of VPN is to disguise the online identity where you are connecting from, and what is your IP via which you are connecting. As I mentioned, these two attributes very easily simplify how the person is disguised. This makes it more difficult for third parties to track your activities online and steal the data. The encryption takes place in real time. These are all the basic advantages of a VPN, and that's what is provided by Azure VPN as well. There are multiple providers in the market which gives you VPN functionality. Even if you want to do it on your mobile, on your laptop, you can have your own VPN via this internet service provider as well and configure them. Even Airtel and Vodafone, you can set up your own VPN and use them. So it doesn't matter which virtual private network you are creating, but if you have an antivirus as well set up, they also provide the VPN functions and features. Try to use it as much as possible. There are certain scenarios where some features of a website or some website might get blocked. So that is one factor which might annoy you as a user, but still it is more preferable, especially if you're doing any banking kind of activities for your personal usage as well. So I will always recommend using a VPN in day-to-day life, not only when you're working in a production kind of environment. Okay, so this is the first part of the agenda that I wanted to cover. What is VPN at a very high level? Anyone got any questions around it? I can take questions after every task that we complete over here as part of this session today. And feel free to drop your question in the chat if there are any. Okay, if there are no questions for now, I'll mark this simple topic as done. Okay, we'll move to the next one. The next one is how does VPN works at a very high level again. Because I want to spend more time on the demo so we understand how to configure VPN in Azure network. Okay. As I mentioned, VPN mainly hides your IP address by letting the network redirect it to a specifically configured remote server run by a VPN host. As I mentioned, when you are connecting, you are a client and there will be a server, and server takes care of misguiding or misleading to the hacker or to the third party person who is trying to understand what data is getting transferred from whom to where and against which IP address. All that is totally hidden by VPN. So if you surf online with a VPN, the VPN server becomes a source of your data. Internet service provider and the third party cannot see which website you visit or which data you send and receive online. It is totally disguising the other people if you're surfing on public network. A VPN works like a filter that turns all your data into gibberish. So it just and data which doesn't make sense to anyone if they're able to hack it. As simple as that. Encryption decryption works at its best in real time. Even if someone were to get their hands on data, it would be useless because of the same nature. So I will not complicate too much. VPN works in simple way where it will hide your identity, where you are working from, what's your IP address, and whatever data you are transferring, it will be encrypting in a format that even if the data is leaked, it will not be of any use. They cannot really read it. Okay, so this is how VPN at a high level works, and that's why when we are trying to connect from a personal network or even professional office network, we should always try to go for a VPN. Any questions on VPN, how it works? No questions. Okay. So now we'll understand what does Azure as a cloud service provider provides, right? Which services can be used to incorporate virtual private network in your current network in office or in professional world so that it can you can make it more secure while accessing the network, while accessing the applications as well. So we have got a service provided in Azure called as Azure VPN Gateway. Okay, let me see, Rajesh. Yeah, Rajesh, I'll come to that point. Yeah, we can do that as well. That's right, because VPN can be used in different modes as mentioned over here. I'll come to that point. Okay. So VPN gateway is one of the services provided by Azure cloud provider that uses a specific type of virtual network gateway. So in Azure, we are eventually trying to protect a virtual network. Virtual network is nothing but a sub network that we define in our cloud. Within that virtual network, we have different subnets that we define, right? So protecting that whole virtual network will require one VPN gateway configured for it to send the entire traffic between Azure virtual network and on-premise location over the public internet. So answering your question, Rajesh, this is what it does, right? Azure VPN gateway specifically encrypts the traffic when you're trying to connect to Azure virtual network, a network that you configure from type A, type B, or C class IP addresses, and then connect from on premises. Like if you have a network in your office, that could be one of the example a different network connecting via ISP to Azure cloud. So eventually you are going via public IP. Even if there is an on-premises data center where a company's application hosted from there, also if you're trying to connect with Azure cloud, even over there we can have Azure VPN gateway. So coming to the next point, VPN gateways are deployed in Azure virtual network and enable the following connectivity. So Rajesh, this should answer your question. Connect on-premise data centers to Azure virtual network is one scenario where Azure suggests it's a site-to-site kind of connection. We can use VPN gateway for it. Second thing is connecting individual devices to Azure virtual network through a point-to-site connection. So site-to-site is between data center as an example or a network where you're hosting your application and servers to a Azure virtual network, Azure VNet. And if you're connecting from office to directly the cloud network on Azure, Google, or even AWS, that's a point to site connection. Suppose a developer or a production management team wants to connect, or a SRE team wants to connect to a Unix server. That I would say simple point to site connection. Even in that case, they first connect via CLI or via portal to the cloud, and then they try to access the virtual machine. That connection should be enabled and traveled through VPN gateway to make it more secure. The next is connecting your Azure virtual network to other Azure virtual network. So you have a VNet configured in Azure. Both the Azure VNets can be connected to each other. That is another type of connection called as network to network connection. But there is a reason, shall we do it via VPN gateway, or is there any other service and mechanism via which it can be efficiently done in Azure? We'll come to that topic as well. Glad, Rajesh, that you got the answer, and this helps you. So in Azure VPN gateway, we can say this is service provided by Azure for the same purpose of protecting your data, ensuring that no one can hack it. And then there are different types of connection: side to side between data center and Azure VNet. Second is point to side between your individual devices to Azure VNet, like a production management team has to connect to Azure cloud. And the third is between two Azure VNets. Everything is from the backbone of Azure, but we can still use VNet if required over here, VNet gateway if required over here. Okay, so that's about Azure VPN gateway that we discussed now. Any questions around it? I think Rajesh asked one question. Anyone has got any questions? Oh yes, Rajesh, we'll cover that as well. I'll do cover that. If you look, there is this agenda where I'll cover that section as well. Okay. Okay. Assume no questions in Azure VPN gateway, I'll move on further. The market is done. Okay. Now we'll go to something called as different gateway types. Again, gateway types is important when there's a network engineer trying to really define the network, how the gateways will also behave in the background when someone is trying to connect to it. From that perspective, it is very important. Again, there are various ways to use gateway types and various scenarios in which I'll give a high level view what we can do. Each virtual network can only have one virtual network gateway of each type. So if you have a VNet in your production environment right now, there is a VNet defined for UAT environment, VNet defined for development environment. You can configure virtual network gateway for each environment so that you can very easily isolate the connectivity by via a data center environment or via individual users as well. And it is very essential because production is critical. So obviously we try to isolate the subscription in some cases, and also the VNet gets isolated most preferably. We would very rarely try to peer production environment with QA or dev environment. Okay. So when you're creating a virtual network gateway, you must make sure the gateway type is correct for your configuration. That's why we are discussing about the gateway types. The available values for gateway types, or I would say the available gateway types are, first is, as we discussed, VPN. Okay, it lets you set up side to side, point to side, and network to network connection. That's one way of a gateway type. The other one is the express route. Okay, express route is a dedicated high-speed private connection. Lets you extend your on-premise network into Microsoft Cloud over a private connection with the help of a connectivity provider. So it's simple, like you have a bridge between your data center and the Azure cloud, which is only dedicated for your data exchange, express route. Same thing can be done by a VPN, but still there would be a public network involved when you are using VPN. So there are two options. we have to be very cautious selecting the right gateway types. Express route is a more preferable because first thing is dedicated high speed private connection. So if you are an architect trying to suggest the right amount type of gateway, we always go with express route. Again, depends on the amount of data. If there is no database involved, there are certain rest calls to be made, and if you know the rest calls are very well secured, and they are used by HTTPS, then we can still use VPN. So there are different scenarios, but as a thumb rule, express route would be more preferable to connect. So Rajesh, coming back to your question of on-premise network to cloud, ideal would be express route based on the data transfer and the security aspect. But if cost is a factor, people also go with VPN to access data. Suppose if you are trying to access data between two cloud providers. In the initial stage, when there is a POC phase where you have to really understand how the configuration is done between different components like web component or API gateway or even databases, you might go for VPN for the time being because you might not use production data. But later on, once the POC is done, we are aware of what the strategy is, then there is an express route that can be set up. Okay, so that's how we define gateway types. As I mentioned, this is very important from network engineering point of view to understand which gateway type we have to use. Okay, that's about gateway types. Any questions from anyone? Okay, good. No questions. Mark this as done. We'll move to VPN gateway. So gateway types at a high level I have explained. There are some VPN gateway types as well, which are defined by Azure. Okay, so when you deploy VPN gateway in Azure, you have to specify the type of the virtual private network you want to be configured on the Azure cloud. One is policy based, other is route based. So when we say policy based, the routing is very static. It is just using a combination of addresses, prefixes from both network control traffic and is encrypted and decrypted throughout the VPN tunnel. So during that routing, the routes in the network table in the background are static, they don't change, it's not dynamic. But when you have route based, dynamic routing protocols are used in the background, which where the routing of foreign tables direct traffic to different IPsec tunnels. I would not go more in detail because this is more of a network concept that you need to understand how route based protocols work in the background with the different tables for route and how the IPsec tunnels are created. But as of now, at a high level, you can just understand that the main difference as specified in this line, right, between these two type of gateways in Azure is how the encryption happens, how the encrypted traffic is specified. First, encryption is based on static routing. We know A to B, B to C, that's it. But when it comes to route based, there are different routes which keep on changing based on the protocol that is used. There are BGP protocols also used when we have to interact between two cloud providers as well. Even there is an active passive standby kind of mode that we try to use so that there are two connections always available. If one connection is impacted in disaster recovery scenario, you can go to the second scenario. So in the backend, how the network packets are routed is defined in a static format. It will be a policy based VPN gateway. If it has to be a dynamic so that it becomes more secure, then we use route based. By default, at least in the scenario that I have configured VPN gateway, we have gone with route based dynamic routing protocols. Okay, so always try to make a note of which VPN gateway type is more essential and beneficial and use that accordingly. Any questions around VPN gateway types? No question? Great. It is done. Now we'll go to the next section, VNet peering versus VPN gateways. As I mentioned, VPN gateway is created for one VNet. VNet is nothing but a virtual network. So in your production environment, you might have virtual network for QA, for dev, and one for production. I suggest we should not try to peer those two networks, production environment to dev environment or production to QA environment. They should be connected by their respective VPN gateways. Okay. But are there scenarios where you would have two VPN, two VNets in same environment like production? Might be. I'll give one example. In landing zone, you have different subscription model, but in the same production environment, and every subscription will have its own VNet. In that case, you might go for VNet peering. As an example, there is a security subscription and then there is a line of business specific subscription. Security subscription will have only those resources configured needed for security. Example, if there is a VM in security via which you can connect to other line of business database servers, that VM is called as jump host. So I might isolate that subscription because tomorrow if that VM gets compromised, it will only impact that network but not impact the servers and the other subscription for the line of businesses. This is one reason why there are a suggestion and recommendation of landing zone. And also you can isolate based on the context. There are certain utility based subscriptions created which are essential for maintaining the whole production environment. Then a different subscription is created and all these form different entities of a landing zone. As I mentioned, again in production environment, if security subscription has to connect to your line of business subscription. In that case, this two virtual network has to talk to each other because line of business subscription will have a database server. And in production management team has to connect from the security jump host to the Linux database server. In that case, I will set up a VNet peering, but not VPN gateway. Okay, let us go over here and read a bit about it. Um, Section is duplicated. I'll remove this. Only the relevant is this part over here. So I'll just highlight a bit over here. So virtual network is a virtual isolated portion of the Azure public network. As we know, virtual network is nothing but a virtual bucket of the number of IPs that you can use for so and so purpose. By default, the traffic cannot be routed between two virtual network. However, it is possible to connect virtual network either with a single region or across two regions, so that traffic can be routed between them. And this routing of traffic, if it is done via VNet peering, it happens in the backbone of Azure directly, so that there is no public intervention in between. Okay, so there are no public network via which you traverse that. Always in a scenario where you have multiple virtual networks in the same environment like production, go for VNet peering. You don't need an additional overhead of VPN gateway because first thing, between two VNet when they are peer to each other, the traffic goes in the backbone of Azure, which is totally over private IPs. It is totally secure. You can have VPN gateways for two VNets in the same environment or same subscription, but then when you again have a VPN gateway, it will associate you to a public IP. It means it is data is again traversed securely but via public internet. I don't see a reason where we need VPN gateway to be used to transfer traffic between same VNet if it is between two Azure VNets. In our production environment, we have used multiple VNets, but VNet peering has worked fine in most of the cases. I'll also give one more example. If you have a data science related applications, right? They have multiple servers with CPU, GPU, and even TPU kind of compute power. For those kind of applications, we have isolated a different VNet and dedicated server and computes over there. In that case, also, if I need to connect a web application, put a data into the data lake and data science application has to consume that, those two applications are hosted in different VNet but connected via VNet peering. So that is secure and it goes via Azure backbone. Okay. So simple conclusion. VNet peering should be the first preference when you are to connect to Azure VNets. But if you are to connect it to the external world, go for VPN gateway. Okay. Before we go for the demo, a quick recap. We discussed about what is virtual private network. We discussed about how VPN works. We discussed about VPN gateway type, site to site, data center to cloud is one example. Point to site, your business users or your production management users connecting to cloud is point to site, network to network between two Azure virtual network. As I said, network to network, if it is Azure virtual network, Azure VPN gateway would be the last option. The more preferable option would be VNet peering. Okay. Then we discuss about gateway types, VPN or express route. Express route will be more preferable when it comes to connecting on premises to cloud so that you have a more highly dedicated private connection. Okay. And VPN gateway types based on the routing tables in the background, policy based if you want a static routing, or route based if you want a dynamic routing. I always go with route based, so it is more dynamic and more secure. And then we discuss about VNet peering and VPN gateway. Always prefer VNet peering if you are going to connect two VNets within the same cloud provider. If it is outside and there would be a public internet connectivity, then you can obviously use VPN gateways. Okay, so that's about the high level theoretical information that I wanted to share. I would like to have keep it 50-50. That's why theoretical I've completed in the first 30 minutes, and the next 25 odd minutes we'll go through the demo setup, and then last 5 minutes for quiz and Q&A. Before I proceed with demo, any questions from anyone? Anyone wants to still volunteer for this demo? They can provide me their ID. I'll add it to my Active Directory in Azure portal, and they can still do the testing if needed. Thanks, Rajesh. Thanks for volunteering. Okay, so before we start, let me go to the portal and reconfirm your ID. I think I have added your ID already and I had disabled. So team, we are trying to give access to Rajesh who has volunteered over here in this demo. What he would help us to do is once we set up a VPN on the Azure portal in my subscription, he should be able to test the connectivity. Is he able to connect via VPN gateway via private IP to the virtual machine in my subscription? First he can try with public IP, and next he will try with private IP. When he tries with private IP, he will not able to connect to the virtual network, to the VM, sorry. But when he is connecting to a VPN and then trying to connect via VPN to the virtual machine with private IP, it should be going through, because he is already securing the network first, connecting to my subscription virtual network via VPN gateway. Okay. So Rajesh, I'm sharing on my screen. This is your account and this is your Gmail ID. I had kept it disabled. Let me enable your account. Okay. I will go through certain demo steps. Meanwhile, Rajesh, you can confirm if you are able to access this default directory of mine with schaskar.ml@gmail.com domain. You should be able to view the resources the way I am able to view it. Give it a try, Rajesh, and keep me posted. Okay. Going back to the slide. To set up a VPN, I will take an example of point to site, because right now I have an virtual network defined on my Azure cloud. I have defined a virtual network gateway, and when Rajesh tries to connect it, it's like an in-office resource, whether part of production management, SRE or development team or QA team are trying to connect to one of the machines on the Azure cloud. So we are trying to set up a point to site connection. Okay. Whenever we are trying to set up this point to site connection, the first thing we require is to create a VNet. A VNet creation is as simple as it. We just configure the VNet by using this by default parameter. So I had a subscription pay as you go resource group I created with this demo name, and then I selected region as Central India. I'm not really using any bash and server host or firewall, and I just specified a wide range of IP under /16, giving me almost 65K IP. So we are sorted over there. Okay, and then a default subnet over here. Rajesh, you will not get an invite in an email because you were already there added based on the last demo that we had. Just try to access the portal if possible. Just log into Azure portal and try to access with your login. Okay, so we talked about virtual network. This is how I created the virtual network. If I can show that network over here, I'll go to the resource group. In this resource group, I'll see here is the virtual network. And this is the current address spaces, the subnets defined in the virtual network at default. That's it. And there is one gateway subnet defined when I created the gateway. Okay. The next step as per this document is to create a VNet gateway. So VNet gateway creation attributes are: you require a resource group, you require a VNet gateway name, Central India is a region that is selected. SKUs. There are multiple SKUs available. So if you go to the SKU chart, let me open that in Azure. Azure VPN gateway SKUs, right? It again depends on the number of connections that you want. It again depends on the bandwidth that you want. Over here, yes. There are a number of SKUs. I think basic has been currently decommission. The document is not yet updated. When I tried to configure, I could not use basic. So it just depends on the tunnel capacity, the maximum throughput, and in certain cases, if there is a zone redundancy, and if you require a BGP support or not. I've just used a very basic one, the first VPN gateway one with 30 max connections, 128 max point to site connections, some open VPN connection, and throughput of 650 Mbps. That's it. And number of supported VMs in this gateway would be 450. I just use that configuration as a SKU over here. Generation 1, again with generation 1 and generation 2, the only difference is the BGP support, if I'm not wrong, BGP support and the throughput. Let me reconfirm again what is the difference between these two generations. Sorry guys, I'm just getting a call couple of times. Let me take this call. Excuse me for just 1 minute. Sorry team for the hold between. Yeah, it just got a bit urgent. Okay, great. So I think it's just the capacity that I see as a major difference with the benchmark throughput. No major difference in gateways. Okay, so this is a screw that we select. Again, as I mentioned, the VPN type over here is route based. I'm using the dynamic routing over here. Rest of them active mode. I don't need it. I don't need BGP. I'm not connecting between two networks or two cloud providers or between data centers. So I'll just keep it as it is. And one public IP to connect to the virtual network gateway. So this is the setup that I did. If I go again to the virtual network gateway, I go to the group. This is a VNet gateway. This is how I set it up. VNet gateway takes a while to set up, approximately 30 minutes. That's another factor why people normally prefer using VNet peering, because if you make any change in the property of the gateway, it takes again 25 to 30 minutes to get that configuration saved. Again, it's a bit annoying when you're working in production environment, and I have seen that in the past. If I need to make any kind of small changes, we have to wait for that amount of time to configure the gateway. And that's the reason why I had configured VNet gateway before this demo. Okay, so this is the attributes to VNet gateway. Thanks, Rajesh, for confirming. I'll just complete this demo attribute discussion and I'll come to that. Okay. After you configure VNet gateway, the next thing is we have to authorize the VPN application. So this is a very common concept in Azure where you have got a VPN application defined in your Active Directory. It is an enterprise kind of a application. that's how it gets registered. You just have to give that consent to use that application for your cloud provider, for your cloud subscription, right? So if you look at here, this is enterprise application, this is a VPN. Over here, you just have to enable and make it given consent for it. So there is an document. Let me show you this authorized VPN application. Open link. There are different kind of VPN applications in Azure that are available. One for public, Azure Government Cloud, some Cloud Germany as well, and open operator specifically for 21 YNET. They have their own private cloud. They have their own Azure application that has to be authenticated, especially for VPN, and this is the default link. So just understand that there are different VPN servers set up in the cloud data center of Azure, and you have to give a consent for that server to connect to your subscription. That's how you can correlate. Hence, this consent is very important. Otherwise, your VPN configuration will fail, irrespective of the fact that you have configured the gateway. Okay. Next thing is configuring authentication for the gateway. So if I go to the slide, as I said, when I try to authorize my VPN application, this is the slide I get. I have a domain called Let's Sell Together. That's an another production live domain via which I do a lot of other projects. And I gave a consent. You cannot give it with gmail.com. It doesn't take personal account. It needs a work account. And once I gave this consent to VPN, my VPN got thoroughly configured. And after that, I need to come back and now define the kind of configuration I require. When I say configuration, I'll go to this options that we discussed, right? Whether I need a point to site connection or a site to site or network to network connection. So when I did that configuration on the VPN, I could see I configured a point to site configuration. That's what we are going to test. So Rajesh will try to test and connect to the VPN network that I have created for my subscription, and he should be able to connect to the VPN. Okay. So this is the configuration that we have to do. Again, it's simple. There is an address pool. This is the address that will be reflected when a connection is established. The open type is VPN. As I mentioned, we have got option of express router and VPN. Authentication type is Azure Active Directory. I'll prefer every time using Active Directory for authentication since we have that feature in Azure. And there are some default issuer, tenant, and audience, which is part of the document provided by Azure. Just go and use those documents. Okay. So this is how you define the gateway. Now your VPN gateway configuration is all done and dusted. There's no other configuration that is required for now for your virtual network. Okay. If I go to the next step again in the demo, we have to download the client profile that is needed to connect to the VPN gateway, and we also have to download the VPN client windows on your machine, on your desktop. So if you go to this configuration site, I'll take you over here in the presentation. This is your VNet gateway. Go to the connections, configurations over here. So point to site configuration, download VPN client. It's nothing but an XML which gives you detail of what are the parameters that are needed to connect to your VPN, that you just need to download and save it in your local directory. And then when you install this VPN client, I had installed this VPN client since I used it multiple times before. You can directly install it from Microsoft Office, Microsoft Play Store, and you should be able to download that client, which looks like this from Microsoft Corporation Azure VPN client. So you need a client to connect to the server. So you download this client. Okay. Once you download this client, what I did is I tried to create a virtual machine, and I showcase that I'm able to connect to the virtual machine via the public IP. Let me show that again this demo. So Rajesh, if you are there, can you also try to connect to this virtual machine via public IP?
Okay. Hi, Shailesh.
Hi Rajesh.
Yeah,
I'll share the public IP details. This is the IP.
sure.
So VM is already configured. Try to connect to it via public IP. I'm able to successfully connect to it. The host name would be demo 19gen-vm. So everyone on the call, what we are trying to do right now is connect to the VM via public IP. Ideally, in a production environment, I would not even configure a public IP. But just for this demo, I am trying to say that without a VPN connection, I can connect to a VM via public IP. Later on, I'll also try to connect via private IP, but I would not be able to connect. by private IP. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to connect via private IP. So I configured a virtual network gateway. I'm trying to connect it first via public IP, which I was able to connect, and then I could not connect. Rajesh, you should do AZ login first so that your AZ login active identity will be used to log into the VM. If you're not able to log in, you would get an authentication error, authorization error. I won't say authentication because you're already authenticated to have an access to the subscription. If you have that access, do let me know. So everyone, this is a default process, right? We always try to log in on the CLI and then the username is displayed. So Rajesh, try to run this command and see if you get an AZ account after your login. If you are not connected, if you're logged out, it will ask for you to log in. So team, going back to the presentation, we had created a virtual machine. We tried to connect via public IP, and then I tried to also connect via private IP. If you look over here, this is the private IP that I use. I'll share it with Rajesh as well. Later on, you can try it with private IP also. I was not able to connect to the private IP. Okay. So the next step is I'm not able to connect to the private IP because I have not connected to the VPN. To connect to the VPN, I just need to first download the VPN client profile, which I showed to you earlier from this location, and import that client profile into Azure VPN client. And then I should try to connect it. So it's a way of configuring your VPN client connection to the VPN host. So I just go to this VPN connect over here. There's a small plus sign in the bottom. Over here, just import that client connection, which I've already done for this demo. So if you download it, you will see two different folders. You go to Azure VPN and there is a configuration file. If you want to look at the configuration file, let me see it, run it quickly for you guys. As I mentioned, it's just an XML. It has got all the relevant details that are required to connect. Is that called the secrets as well. So everything is downloaded for you by default. And that's how you are able to connect to the VPN gateway. Now, if I go and say connect to this VPN, I have earlier already by default connected via this user Python test. And that's the same user via which I'm trying to connect to the VM using this public IP. So if you look at this, I have been already logged into Python test. Let me show over here, last login. So I use this identity, Python test. I was able to connect to the machine via public IP. Okay. And then I tried to connect it via private IP, but I was not able to do that. This means the machine is right now behind Azure backbone network via private IP. I cannot connect it until as I connect to the gateway. Now, since I'm connected to the gateway over here, you can see there is a successful token exchange and the status says success. Hence, my credentials have been verified. I have the access to connect to the VPN. I have the access to connect to the gateway. Now I should be able to connect via private IP. There you go. So ideally in production environment, I will not even use public IP so that no one can access my VM. No one can access any database running on this VM. No one can access any application running even on a cluster or even on the VM. If it is hosted on a web server, your connections will totally be private. Via VPN gateway, your connection is secure, point to site, and via VPN gateway, you're connecting to the virtual machine on Azure via Azure Backbone, which is more secure. Okay. So going back to the demo, we connected to the VPN. I showed you how we can import it from this client over here with this plus sign, import the configuration. It will directly show you the config, just accept it, save it, and just try to connect. And that's what we did, connect and disconnect to connect to the VPN gateway. Okay. Over here, I showed the example that when I tried with private IP, I was able to connect now because I'm connected to the virtual network via VPN. Okay. There are certain VPN properties that are defined. I just gave a view of, there is a home page also that you can customize, logo that you can customize for your own VPN gateway in your company, and also some nodes via which these connections can be established. Okay. Um, okay. I think this is an additional topic I want to cover. Let me go through. Connect to VM via private, review VM properties. Done. Last three steps are pending. Before I go to last three steps, anyone has got any questions? Hope it is very clear. It's very essential aspect when we are working production environment to always have a VPN gateway. Any questions, anyone? No? Good. Rajesh, how far are you able to proceed? Any issues?
Yeah, hi Shailesh. So I'm not able to log in through the Azure ID. It says permission denied.
Can you paste the error, or if you want, you can share your screen?
Yeah, I will paste the screenshot here.
Okay, you can raise a screenshot, that's fine. Meanwhile, I'll proceed now. See, now in this case, Rajesh is trying to connect to, first thing is my subscription. Once he gets access to the subscription, he'll try to connect to my VM. So for me, Rajesh can be an unknown user. Ideally, he should not be even able to connect to my VPN, because if anyone can connect without getting proper authorization, it will be difficult for me to protect my production application, right? Or production environment. So if an unknown user tries to connect to VPN, if suppose he goes over here, he somehow gets this configuration XML. This configuration XML is nothing but the secret into it, right? Because I showed you, it has got client secrets. If that secret is leaked, anyone can connect. This could be a hack into the system. But that's not how Azure VPN works. If a person who got that XML, even if he tries to connect, he will say, he will get a message over here as mentioned in the image. Your administrator has configured the application Azure VPN to block users unless they are specifically granted access. Same thing I did with Python test. So if I go back again to Azure Gateway, as I mentioned earlier, Azure Gateway VPN is configured in your Active Directory. It is registered when I say configured. And there is an option of users and groups. If I don't add any user over here, it means he has not got access or not authorized to connect to the Azure VPN application, which is registered in AD. So your identity is registered in AD, your VPN application also registered. Until unless I give that identity access to the VPN application, he will not be able to configure. Hence, your VPN gateway is also protected, thus your production environment. So this clearly means anyone, if they get that XML, they'll still not be able to connect to your VPN gateway. They will not be able to connect to your production environment. What I need to do next is just grant them access to this enterprise application, which is registered in the Active Directory. Then they will be able to connect. So you have a control over here. Your identity management works over here. And then they can connect again to that VM via private IP. Okay, this is very important when it comes to VPN connection. No one can connect to a VPN directly without you authorizing them in production environment. Last is the sign-in logs. In VPN Enterprise application itself, you can have more governance and audit information if you go over here and look at the sign-in logs. Over here, it reflects the details of who has signed in from which location and from and when by which ID. See, VPN is successful. It also gives the location. Right now, I'm not implemented conditional access, which I can do. It also gives the location and IP details also. It gives all information from where, from which device I have logged in. And this all is very important from governance and audit point of view. Okay, so that covers the demo altogether. Just taking a short break. Let me see what errors Rajesh is getting. Oh, Rajesh, I think you're trying SSH. You should have to try AZ SSH. So if you look at that command I provided to you, it is AZ. So it's an first, hence this is first an AZ login is required. A normal SSH won't work because I've enabled identity management over here. Okay. Fine, team. We are done. 25 minutes. Another 4 minutes. 1 second, Rajesh. Sir, Sorry, Tim, again. I just got a call from office. I had to attend it. Okay. So, Rajesh, we can discuss that you don't have AZ CLI, right? You have an AZ portal already installed anywhere else?
Yes, have. I'm logged into AZ portal.
So you can just open your shell from there also you can try because any shell that you open in Azure portal, the cloud shell, it by default has got CLI installed in it.
Ah, okay, I can. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you're logging over there with your Gmail account. Yes, exactly. That's how it should work over here. I think over here also you have this connect AZ, right? Shows your account. Try AZ SSH doesn't work. AZ in a local machine.
No, no, I don't have the CLI, so I will,
Okay. Try from cloud
install.
shell. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, yeah, I will try
Okay.
in Cloud Shell.
Thanks, Rajesh. Going back to the cloud present to the demo, I think we're almost done. I have a quiz for you guys. Let us go through this quickly in next 3 minutes. Can anyone answer which is the best solution for connecting an on-premise environment to the cloud? Anyone on call? A or B? You can type in the chat if you want. That's right. B is the right answer. As I mentioned, dedicated high-speed network is obviously preferred. So express route would be the go-to answer. That's right, Kunj Patel. You're right. Yes, Rajesh. As I mentioned earlier as well, if you're doing a POC, go with VPN. If not, express route always if you're planning for a production live environment setup. Price is obviously high because you get a dedicated network, high speed and private network. Correct. Okay, the next question. Main Office requires access to the applications running on the IaaS virtual machines in Azure. So your IaaS platform. Which connectivity should we aim for? Should we aim for site-to-site connection, point-to-site, or network-to-network connection when you have to connect from your main office to your virtual machine in Azure? Anyone? Which connectivity should you go for? Others? Kunj Patel, you want to answer? Whether A, B, or C? Yeah, Ashish, point to site is right. Kunj Patel, that's right. Point to site. So Rajesh, yes, see, site to site also can work at the office network level, but if you look at the individual trying to connect, it is more reflected as a point to site connectivity. Because your individual users, as I mentioned, production management, SRE team, development, QA team, they're trying to connect from one point of their local desktop to the cloud. So it's referred to as a point to site connection. Great. Last. Good to know. Thanks, Rajesh. So with that, we conclude last few seconds. If anyone has got any questions, no questions. Good. So I think Rajesh, give it a try. Let us see if you can have this connectivity test done at your end. If you are able to connect via your AZ Cloud Shell.
I think I'm not able to create a Cloud Shell. It says something went wrong. But anyway, I got the gist of what you explained, and it was wonderful session. So yeah, big thumbs up for this. Thanks, Shailesh.
Great. No worries. Great. Thank you. Thanks everyone for spending this 1 hour on Friday evening. Hopefully this was fruitful to you guys. Go through these slides. I try to share these slides as well if needed, and also the demo that will be later on the channel of Pune Tech Community. There will be few more similar sessions that I will conduct down the line. If any question, feel free to reach out to me. I have already given my LinkedIn details. Let me also try to post that details over here on the chat so that if needed, you can ping me over there. Last time I conducted one session for identity management. Yeah, there were a few queries that came across, and it was more related to practical implementation that they were looking after in their production environment. So I was happy that I could help them out. This is my LinkedIn profile. Go to it and let me know if you need any help. We can connect over here. Great. I won't take a lot of time. Thanks again, everyone, for joining this call. And thanks, Mita, for organizing this. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening and nice weekend. Thanks, Rajesh, for giving it a try.